Another student loan payment? Dad tossed my mail across the dinner table with disdain. All that money for a business degree and you're still working as a junior analyst. Should have gone into engineering like I said. I quietly picked up the envelope, remembering the day 3 months ago when I'd actually paid off my loans in full. Not that they knew about my rapid rise at Griffin Global Enterprises, or that I wasn't just a junior analyst anymore. Jane got promoted to senior engineer last week. Mom chimed in, referencing my childhood friend. Making 6 figures now. If only you'd listened to your father. I suppressed a smile, thinking about the 7-figure bonus sitting in my investment account. The same bonus I'd earned for orchestrating Griffin's most successful international expansion. How's the job hunt going? Dad continued, between bites of Mom's meatloaf. Any real positions opening up at Griffin? Maybe in maintenance or reception. At least then you'd be in the same building as actual executives. If only he knew I had the corner office on the top floor. Still just analyzing data, I replied vaguely, using their assumptions as a shield. For 3 years I'd let them believe I was struggling, partly because I was tired of their criticism but mostly because I enjoyed the irony of their ignorance. Emily, Dad sighed, using his disappointed parent voice, you need to be more ambitious. Look at me, 30 years at Griffin, worked my way up to senior maintenance supervisor. That's real work, not pushing papers and making spreadsheets. I nodded, remembering how just yesterday I'd approved his department's budget, cutting it by 15% due to inefficiencies I'd identified. The memo would hit his desk tomorrow. The company party is next week, Mom mentioned. Your father gets to bring family this year. You should come, network with some real professionals. I wouldn't miss it, I said truthfully. After all, I was hosting it. The week passed in a blur of executive meetings and international conference calls. While Dad fixed ventilation systems and bragged about his inside knowledge of corporate operations, I was restructuring entire divisions and negotiating multi-billion-dollar deals. My phone buzzed during a board meeting, a text from Mom. Don't forget to dress professionally for the party. First impressions matter. I glanced down at my Armani suit and Louboutin heels, then at the nameplate on my desk. Emily Chin, Griffin Global Enterprises. Everything okay, Ms. Chin? My CFO asked. Perfect, I smiled. Just confirming details for tomorrow's party. Speaking of which, has everyone signed off on the new organizational changes? Yes, ma'am. Including the maintenance department restructuring. Though some supervisors might be surprised by the budget cuts. I thought of Dad's face when he'd see the memo. Change can be surprising. The night of the party arrived, and I watched from my office as employees and their families filed into Griffin's grand ballroom. Mom had insisted on doing my makeup and helping me choose an outfit. I'd let her fuss over me before changing into my actual party attire at the office. Miss Chin, my assistant Michael appeared. Everything's ready. The board members are in position, and the organizational announcement is prepared for your speech. Perfect. And my parents. Your father is currently telling anyone who'll listen about his direct line to executive decisions. Your mother is at the buffet, explaining how her daughter works, somewhere in data entry. I smoothed my designer dress and checked my reflection. Time to adjust their perspective. The ballroom fell silent as I approached the podium. Dad was mid-story about his maintenance expertise, while Mom arranged appetizers on her plate. Neither had noticed me yet. Welcome to Griffin Global's annual family celebration. I began, my voice carrying through the professional sound system. Dad's head snapped up. Mom's plate clattered. For those who don't know me, I'm Emily Chin, CEO of Griffin Global Enterprises. And we have some exciting announcements about the company's future direction. The look on their faces was worth 3 years of playing along with their assumptions. The silence that followed my introduction was broken only by the sound of Mom's appetizer plate hitting the floor. Dad stood frozen, his champagne glass suspended halfway to his mouth, as his colleagues turned to stare at him. The maintenance supervisor who'd been bragging about his corporate insights, now revealed as the CEO's clueless father. Before we begin, I continued smoothly, I'd like to acknowledge our long-term employees, including our maintenance supervisor, Robert Chin, my father, who's been with Griffin for 30 years. The spotlight found him and I watched him shrink under its glare. His maintenance team, scattered throughout the ballroom, exchanged shocked glances. As many of you know, Griffin has been undergoing significant changes. Tonight, I'm announcing our most ambitious restructuring to date. I clicked to the next slide, displaying the new organizational chart. Starting next quarter, we're consolidating our operations to improve efficiency. Dad's eyes widened as he found his department on the chart, now under new management, with a significantly reduced budget. Of course, I added, my voice carrying a hint of irony only my parents would understand. These changes are based on thorough data analysis, something my business degree proved quite useful for. The board members chuckled. They'd heard about my parents' dismissal of my education during the vetting process for my CEO appointment. It had become something of an inside joke during board meetings. Miss Chin, my CFO, approached the podium right on cue. Shall we discuss the international expansion? Of course. But first I see my mother by the buffet. Mom, would you like to join us? I believe you were just telling Mrs. Peterson about my job in data entry. Mom's face turned scarlet as Mrs. Peterson, the wife of our Asia-Pacific director, tried to hide her smile. Emily, she whispered as she reluctantly approached, why didn't you tell us? Tell you? I raised an eyebrow. Like when I tried to tell you about my promotion to director of operations. You were too busy comparing me to Jane's engineering career. Or when I made executive vice president. Dad was explaining why real work doesn't happen in offices. The ballroom had grown uncomfortably quiet, hundreds of employees watching this family drama unfold. Dad finally unfroze, placing his champagne glass on a nearby table with a shaking hand. But you're just... He stammered. Just what, Dad? Just a paper pusher? Just wasting my degree? Just a disappointment compared to all those engineers you admire. Michael appeared at my elbow. Ms. Chin, the Tokyo office is on the line about the merger. Put them through to the main screen, I instructed, watching my parents' faces as the massive display lit up with a live feed from our Japanese headquarters. Chin-sama, the Tokyo team bowed respectfully. The contracts are ready for your approval. $5 billion as negotiated. Dad's knees actually buckled. A nearby executive caught his arm, helping him to a chair. Excellent. I responded in fluent Japanese, another skill they dismissed as impractical. Process the transfer. I'll review the final documents in the morning. As the screen went dark, I turned back to the stunned audience. Now about those organizational changes. The next hour was a blur of announcements, presentations, and strategic reveals. Throughout it all, I watched my parents from the corner of my eye. Mom had found a seat next to Dad, both of them staring at me like they'd never seen me before. In a way, they hadn't. They'd never seen me lead a board meeting, negotiate international deals, or command a room full of executives. They'd never bothered to look past their own assumptions about what success should look like. And finally, I concluded, we'll be opening our new Silicon Valley campus next month. The Chin Innovation Center, named after. I paused for effect. My grandmother, who sold her wedding ring to help pay for my worthless business degree. That got Dad's attention. His mother's sacrifice had been a point of contention for years. He'd called it a waste of family resources. Questions? I asked the room. Hundreds of hands shot up, but all I could see was my parents' hands remaining firmly in their laps, their worlds quietly imploding. Mr. Chin, I called out, enjoying how Dad flinched at the formal address. As maintenance supervisor, perhaps you'd like to share your inside knowledge about our corporate direction? You seemed to have plenty to say earlier. After the presentations concluded, I watched from the elevated platform as my parents sat shell-shocked at their table, barely touching the gourmet dinner being served. Around them, employees and executives buzzed with excitement about the announced changes, occasionally throwing curious glances their way. Your father's maintenance team is requesting an emergency meeting, Michael murmured, appearing at my side. Apparently, they're concerned about working under the CEO's father after his numerous claims of executive insight. Schedule it for Monday, I replied, taking a sip of champagne worth more than Dad's monthly salary. And send them the complete efficiency reports. Let them see exactly why their department is being restructured. And your mother has been trying to access your office, he added. She told security she's the CEO's mom and demanded to see your credentials. I couldn't help but laugh. How the tables turn. Remember last Christmas when she told everyone I was still finding my way, career-wise? The irony was delicious. 4 years they dismissed my career choices, my education, my entire professional path. Now they were scrambling to understand how their underachieving daughter had become their boss. Miss Chin, one of the board members approached. That was quite a revelation about your parents. Though I must say their previous comments about your career make our quarterly profit margins even more impressive. Nothing motivates quite like parental doubt, Richard, I smiled. Speaking of which, I nodded toward my parents' table, where Dad was now arguing quietly but intensely with Mom. Their body language screamed discomfort as executives stopped by to introduce themselves to the CEO's parents. Emily, a familiar voice called. I turned to see Jane, my childhood friend, standing there in her engineer's badge. Your father invited me as his department's consultant. I had no idea that the girl whose business degree was throwing her potential away is now your boss? I finished for her. Life has interesting twists, doesn't it? Your mom kept telling my mom how I was making 6 figures. She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. While I was making 7 plus stock options? I raised an eyebrow. Maybe we should discuss your consultant contract. My useless business skills might have spotted some interesting margins for negotiation. As Jane hurried away, I decided it was time for the final act. Michael, please escort my parents to my office. I believe we're overdue for a family meeting. Minutes later, I entered my corner office to find them standing awkwardly among the trappings of my success. Mom was staring at my Wall Street Journal 40 under 40 cover feature, while Dad examined the view from windows that overlooked the city he'd only seen from ground level. Quite different from the maintenance office, isn't it? I asked, closing the door. Emily, Mom started, her voice trembling. Why didn't you tell us? Tell you. I walked to my desk, running my hand along its polished surface. Like you told Grandma her sacrifice was wasted? Like you told our relatives I was still finding myself while I was negotiating million-dollar deals. We were trying to protect you, Dad protested weakly. The corporate world. The corporate world that I now run? I interrupted, pointing to the organizational chart where his department was clearly under my authority. The one where your job literally depends on my decisions. About that, he shifted uncomfortably. The budget cuts are necessary and backed by data, I finished. Or is my business degree still too worthless to make those calculations? Mom sank into one of the visitor chairs, her social climbing fantasies probably rewriting themselves in real time. All this time, when we thought you were struggling, I was running the company, I nodded. Interesting how assumptions work, isn't it? You assumed my degree was worthless, my job was entry-level, my potential was wasted. Meanwhile, I was becoming your boss. We were wrong, Dad admitted, looking smaller in his maintenance uniform than I'd ever seen him. About everything. Yes, you were. I sat down in my executive chair, the power dynamic finally physically matching reality. And now we have some decisions to make. Decisions? Mom looked up sharply. About your positions here. I pulled out 2 folders. Dad, your department's inefficiency isn't just about numbers. It's about leadership. Your claims of executive insight have created liability issues. He paled. Are you firing me? I'm offering you choices, I corrected, pushing the folders forward. Option 1. Early retirement, full benefits and a generous severance package. Option 2. A transfer to our new facility in Phoenix, under proper supervision and without the storytelling about corporate insights. Phoenix. Mom gasped. But our lives are here. My life was here too, I reminded her. Until you made it clear it wasn't good enough. Funny how perspective changes when you're on the other side of judgment. And what about my job? Dad asked quietly. You mean besides being the CEO's father who spent years mocking her career choice? That's up to you. Choose a folder. They stared at the folders like they contained explosives. In a way, they did. The power to blow up their comfortable assumptions about hierarchy, success, and family dynamics. You have until Monday to decide. I stood up, straightening my designer suit. Oh, and Mom? About those student loan payments you were so worried about. I paid them off 3 months after becoming CEO. My worthless degree actually turned out to be quite profitable. As they left my office looking shell-shocked and small, I called out one last time. Dad? Next time you want to share inside knowledge about corporate decisions, make sure you're not getting that knowledge from the daughter you underestimated. Sometimes success isn't just about proving them wrong, it's about becoming the person they never thought you could be. And sometimes the best revenge is simply letting them realize it on their own. The following week unfolded like a masterclass in corporate karma. Dad chose the Phoenix transfer, his pride unable to accept retirement under his daughter's terms. Mom spent 3 days crying about leaving their social circle, conveniently forgetting how many times she'd made me cry about my disappointing career choices. My office became a revolving door of revelations. Board members shared stories of my parents' previous comments at company functions, Dad's boasts about knowing the real corporate story, now hilariously ironic. Executives who'd endured his maintenance department's inefficiencies brought reports that suddenly made sense in light of his leadership style. "Miss Chin," Michael announced one morning, "your mother is in the lobby again. She's telling everyone about how she always believed in your potential." Really? I pulled up the security footage. Like when she told Mrs. Davidson at last year's Christmas party that I was still trying to find my path, while I was actually closing our biggest merger? She's requesting a meeting. Says it's about the Phoenix transfer. I checked my schedule, deliberately full of the international calls and board meetings they'd once dismissed as paper pushing. Give her 15 minutes this afternoon, I decided. Between Tokyo and London. When Mom entered my office later, she'd clearly dressed for the occasion, probably hoping to impress the daughter she'd never thought could succeed. "Emily," she started, clutching her designer knockoff bag, "about Phoenix. The decision is final." I cut her off, signing documents worth millions while she watched. "Dad's department needs proper oversight, and his reputation here is compromised."
The aroma of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie filled my father's mansion, but all I could smell was my stepmother's expensive perfume as she blocked my path to the dining room. "Oh, Alexandra," Barbara said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The adults' table is full. Why don't you sit with the children? It's more appropriate." I glanced past her to the main dining table, where my father sat at the head, deep in conversation with my stepbrother David about their company's latest acquisition. At 34, I was hardly a child, but that had never mattered to Barbara. In her eyes, I would always be the awkward teenager who didn't fit into her perfect family portrait. "The kids' table?" I kept my voice neutral, though my hands clenched at my sides. "I haven't sat there since I was 16. "Well, we have important business matters to discuss." She gestured to the main table where various executives from Harrison Global sat with their spouses. "You wouldn't understand anyway, dear. You've never had a head for business." If she only knew. While they thought I was running a small investment advisory firm, I had quietly built Harrison Capital into one of the most powerful private equity companies in New York. The press called me the ghost because no one knew who owned the firm that was systematically acquiring some of the city's most prestigious businesses, including, as of this morning, controlling interest in Harrison Global. "Fine," I said, turning toward the rickety card table set up in the corner. "I'll sit with the kids." Barbara's triumphant smile followed me as I made my way past my teenage cousins and their smartphones. My father didn't even look up as I passed, too engrossed in explaining Harrison Global's 5-year expansion plan to David, a plan I knew would never materialize. "Alex," my 10-year-old cousin Tommy beamed as I sat down. "Want to see my new video game?" I smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. "Sure, buddy." At least the kids were real. No hidden agendas, no social climbing, just honest enthusiasm for life. Unlike the main table, where every conversation was a carefully choreographed dance of power and influence. Harrison Global's stock hit another record high today, David announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Dad's leadership is really taking the company to new heights. I bit back a smile, thinking of the documents sitting in my office downtown. Harrison Global's stock price was artificially inflated, propped up by creative accounting and my father's reputation. Tomorrow, everything would change. "Alexandra," my father finally acknowledged my existence. "How's that little investment firm of yours doing?" Before I could answer, David snickered. "Still giving financial advice to retirees, sis?" "Something like that," I replied, watching Barbara beam at her precious son. "You know," David continued, "if you ever want to learn real business, I could probably find you an entry-level position at Harrison Global. Something simple, of course. The kids' table suddenly felt like the perfect vantage point to observe this scene of family dysfunction. My father, once a brilliant businessman, had become complacent, letting David and Barbara's influence cloud his judgment. They turned Harrison Global, the company my grandfather built, into a hollow shell of its former glory. My phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. A message from my assistant. Everything's set for tomorrow. Press release scheduled for 9 a.m. Anyone interesting at your new firm? Barbara asked with feigned interest. Any potential suitors? You're not getting any younger, dear. I thought about Michael Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Industries, who had just agreed to be Harrison Capital's new president after the takeover. He'd been quite interested when I revealed I was the mysterious owner he'd been negotiating with for months. No one special, I said. Such a shame, Barbara sighed dramatically. All work and no play. No wonder you're still single. I glanced at my watch. In less than 15 hours, Barbara would learn exactly how I spent my time. The thought almost made the kids' table worth it. More turkey, Alexandra, my father called out, finally remembering his actual daughter existed. No thanks, I replied, watching him return his attention to David immediately. My father hadn't always been this way. Before Barbara, before he became obsessed with molding David into his perfect hair, he'd been different. He'd been the one who taught me about business, who let me sit in his office after school and learn about stocks and investments. But that changed when he married Barbara 12 years ago. Suddenly, everything became about David, the son he never had. I was quietly pushed aside, my suggestions ignored, my insights dismissed. Even after graduating top of my class from Wharton, I was still just his little girl who didn't understand business. So I left, took my trust fund and the lessons my father had taught me, and built something of my own. Something bigger than Harrison Global would ever be under their leadership. Alex, Tommy tugged at my sleeve. Can you help me with my math homework after dinner? Dad says I need to learn about money if I want to be successful like Grandpa. I looked at this innocent kid, untainted by the family's politics. Sure, Tommy, I know a thing or two about money. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of business boasting from the main table. David detailed his plans to acquire smaller tech companies. My father nodded approvingly at everything his Stetson said. Barbara orchestrated the conversation like a conductor, ensuring everyone knew exactly who was in charge of the family's future. Harrison Global will hit $10 billion in market cap next year, David proclaimed. Maybe then we can upgrade from the kids' table. Everyone at the main table laughed. I smiled too, but for a different reason. I checked my phone again. Another message from my assistant. Sign company confirmed for 8 a.m. installation. All paperwork filed. Alexandra, Barbara called out, since you're sitting with the children, perhaps you'd like to help clear the tables. The adults need to discuss some confidential business matters. I stood up, gathering plates from the kids' table. Of course. Don't let me interrupt the important people. That's the problem with Alexandra, I heard Barbara Sage whisper to my father. No ambition. No understanding of real business. Thank goodness we have David to carry on your legacy. If she only knew that while they were planning their next fiscal quarter, I was planning to own the entire company, that every major decision they'd make from tomorrow onward would require my approval, that the Harrison name they were so proud of would soon have a very different meaning. Thanks for sitting with us, Alex, Tommy said as I helped him with his coat later. The kids' table is more fun anyway. I hugged him goodbye. You're right, buddy. Sometimes the best view is from the sidelines. Driving home to my penthouse apartment, the one my family had never seen, I thought about tomorrow, about the look on their faces when they realized that the unsuccessful daughter they'd relegated to the kids' table had outmaneuvered them all. My phone rang, Barbara calling, probably to remind me about some family obligation I was failing to fulfill. I let it go to voicemail and turned onto Park Avenue, where Harrison Global's headquarters dominated the skyline. Tomorrow that building would have a new name, and everyone would finally understand why the kids' table had the best seat in the house. The next morning, I arrived at my office in Harrison Capital's unmarked building at 7:30 a.m. The sign company's trucks were already positioned in front of Harrison Global headquarters across the street, though the workers hadn't started yet. They were waiting for my signal. Good morning, Miss Harrison. My assistant Sarah greeted me with coffee. Your father has already called 3 times. Of course he had. The morning's financial news was reporting unusual trading activity in Harrison Global stock, and major shareholders had been quietly contacted about an upcoming announcement. "And David?" I asked, settling behind my desk. 6 calls, plus 2 rather aggressive voicemails. Sarah's lips twitched. "He seems concerned about the board meeting scheduled for 10 a.m., the one he just found out about." I smiled, remembering David's boasting at the Thanksgiving table just yesterday. "Has the press release been distributed?" "Scheduled for 8:30, right after the sign change." Speaking of which, she gestured to my window, where the first crane was moving into position. My phone buzzed. Barbara calling again. I let it go to voicemail and instead opened the morning's report. Harrison Global's stock had been halted pending the announcement, but rumors were already spreading. The business news channels were running speculation about a possible hostile takeover. If they only knew it wasn't hostile at all. The board had approved everything weeks ago, tired of David's mismanagement and my father's blind faith in his stepson. At 8:15, Sarah appeared in my doorway. "They're ready." I stood up, straightening my suit. "Let's give them a show." The first workers began dismantling the giant Harrison GLBL letters that had dominated the building's facade for 20 years. A crowd was gathering on the street below, including several news crews. I spotted my father's town car pulling up, followed by David's Tesla. "Right on schedule." "What the hell is going on?" My father's voice boomed through the lobby of Harrison Global as I walked in. "Who authorized this?" David was already shouting at the building manager. "Stop them immediately. I demand to know who ordered this." I did. My voice cut through the chaos. They turned, faces draining of color as they saw me standing there in my executive suit, nothing like the casual clothes I wore at family gatherings. "Alexandra?" My father stepped forward. "What are you talking about?" Barbara burst through the doors, her designer handbag swinging wildly. "What is she doing here?" "This is a family matter." "Exactly," I smiled. "A family matter. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in the boardroom." "The boardroom?" David scoffed. "You have no authority here, sis. Security." Actually, I held up my phone, displaying the official documents. As of 8 a.m. this morning, I have full authority. Harrison Capital now owns controlling interest in Harrison Global. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the workers continued removing the old sign. "Harrison Capital?" My father's voice was barely a whisper. "My company," I explained calmly. "The one you've all been too busy to ask about. We specialize in acquiring underperforming companies with strong potential. Companies like this one." David lunged forward. "This is impossible. I would have known if someone was buying up shares." "Would you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Like you knew about the 3 failed acquisitions you tried to hide last quarter, or the creative accounting that's been masking the company's real financial state." My father's face went pale. "David, what is she talking about?" "She's lying," David shouted, but his eyes darted nervously to the papers in my hand. "The board didn't think so," I continued. "They voted unanimously for the acquisition last week. Check your email. The official announcement goes out in about 2 minutes." Barbara stepped between us, her perfect makeup already showing signs of stress. "Robert, don't listen to her. She's just jealous of David's success." "She's always been jealous." I laughed softly. "Jealous? Of what?" "The man who's driven our grandfather's company to the brink of insolvency, who's been cooking the books to hide his failures." "That's not," David started, but I cut him off. "The SEC filing details everything, David. Every misleading report, every hidden loss. Would you like me to continue this discussion here in the lobby, or should we take it upstairs?" My father sank into a nearby chair, looking suddenly old. "How did you do this?" "I learned from the best," I said quietly. "Remember those afternoons in your office before Barbara? When you taught me about business, about seeing opportunities others missed? I was paying attention." Outside, the last letter of the old sign came down. The crowd had grown larger, phones recording everything. "You can't do this to us," Barbara hissed. "We're family." "Family?" I turned to her. "Like when you put me at the kids' table yesterday, when you've spent years treating me like an embarrassment? That kind of family." My phone buzzed. The press release had gone out. On the street, reporters were already going live with the story. "The board meeting starts in an hour," I announced. "David, you'll need to prepare a formal resignation." Dad, you can stay on as chairman emeritus if you wish, but operational control transfers to Harrison Capital effective immediately. And if we refuse? David's voice shook with rage. Then the SEC gets the uncensored version of those financial reports. Your choice. Barbara grabbed my father's arm. Robert, do something. But my father was staring at the papers in my hand, recognition dawning in his eyes. You used my own lessons against me. I used them to save your company, I corrected him. Harrison Global was 3/4 away from a major crisis. David's mismanagement would have destroyed everything grandfather built. You ungrateful little. David started toward me, but security stepped forward. My security. Mr. Harrison, one guard said firmly, please step back. The new sign was being lifted into place now. Harrison Capital in sleek, modern letters. Below it in smaller text. Founded by Alexandra Harrison. The shareholders. David tried one last time. Are thrilled, I finished for him. The stock will resume trading at 11 a.m. Our analysts project a 30% jump once the market digests the news about new management. Barbara had started crying, her mascara running. How could you do this to your own brother? Stepbrother, I corrected her. And I learned from you, Barbara. Family is business, right? That's what you've always said. My father stood up slowly. All these years while we thought you were running a small investment firm, giving advice to retirees. I smiled. I was building something bigger than Harrison Global ever was. Something real, not built on ego and false projections. The new sign was fully installed now, gleaming in the morning sun. Cameras flash as reporters got their shots. The board meeting is in the main conference room, I said, turning toward the elevators. I trust you all know the way, unless you prefer to sit at the kids' table. That evening, after the dust had settled and the papers were signed, I sat in what had been my father's office, now mine. The view of Manhattan at sunset was exactly as I remember from those childhood afternoons. Sarah brought in the evening papers. The story was everywhere. Harrison Global acquired in surprise takeover. Daughter takes control. A new era for Harrison Empire. Wall Street's ghost revealed. My phone had been buzzing all day with messages from family members. Cousin Tommy had texted, "Does this mean I can sit at the grown-up table now?" I smiled and texted back, "Any table you want, buddy." A knock at the door, my father standing there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. The board was right, he said quietly, about everything. David, I should have seen it. You saw what you wanted to see, I replied. He nodded slowly. And you? What do you see? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. I see a company that needs rebuilding, a legacy that needs protecting, and a father who might remember he has a daughter who learned everything he taught her. He sat down heavily. When did you become so formidable? I always was, Dad. You just forgot to look. We talked for hours that night, really talked for the first time in years. About business, about family, about the future. Barbara and David had already cleared out their offices, their resignations effective immediately. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But for now, this was enough. As I drove home that night, I passed Harrison Global, now Harrison Capital, its new sign illuminated against the dark sky. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about building something so magnificent they can't ignore you anymore. And sometimes the kids' table gives you the perfect view of everything you're going to change. The restaurant's private dining room felt suffocating, despite its high ceilings and elegant decor. My father's 60th birthday celebration was in full swing, crystal glasses clinking as relatives shared stories about his successful law career. I sat quietly at the corner of the long table, picking at my overpriced steak, trying to become invisible. A skill I perfected over the years. And here's to my daughter Emma, Dad announced, raising his glass. Recently made partner at Anderson & Mitchell, following in her old man's footsteps. My sister stood up, basking in the approval that radiated from every corner of the room. Her designer dress probably cost more than what most people thought I made in a month. She'd always been the golden child, the one who did everything right, prestigious law school, perfect marriage, right connections. Thanks, Daddy, she beamed. I learned from the best. I took another sip of wine, remembering all the times I'd heard, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Growing up, Every decision I made that didn't align with their planned path was met with disappointment. Engineering school instead of law school. Starting my own tech company instead of joining a firm. Living modestly instead of flaunting wealth. And then there's Sophie, my mother added with a tight smile. Still doing her. What do you call it, dear? Computer thing? Artificial intelligence development, I corrected quietly. My company specializes in AI solutions for. Yes, Dad waved his hand dismissively, playing with computers. At least one of my children understood the value of a real career. The familiar sting of his words burned, but I forced myself to maintain a neutral expression. If only they knew that my computer thing had revolutionized multiple industries. That the modest office they mocked as a hobby shop was just a front for my real operations. Did you hear about Emma's new house in the Hamptons? Mom gushed to anyone who would listen. 5 bedrooms, private beach access. It's nothing really, Emma said with false modesty. Just a little weekend getaway. Though Sophie, if you ever need a break from your startup, you're welcome to visit. When we're not there, of course. More polite laughter. I thought about my own properties, the penthouse in Manhattan, the villa in Tuscany, the private island in the Pacific. All carefully hidden under various LLC names, their ownership obscured by layers of corporate privacy protection. A toast, my Uncle Robert stood up, glass in hand. To James Morrison, who raised one hell of a successful daughter. And Sophie, my aunt added, clearly feeling obligated. She's trying her best. I watched my father's face. There it was, that slight grimace he always got when someone mentioned me. As if my very existence was a disappointment he had to endure. Well, he said, straightening his tie, at least one of my children isn't a disappointment. Emma understood what it means to build a real career, to create a legacy. She's made the Morrison name mean something in the legal world. The room fell awkwardly silent. Even by his standards, this was harsh. James, my mother whispered, maybe that's a bit. No, Margaret, it needs to be said. He turned to face me directly. Sophie, you had every advantage. The best schools, every opportunity. And what do? Waste it all playing entrepreneur in some tiny office downtown. Do you know what people say? They ask me what went wrong with my other daughter. I set down my wine glass, the crystal making a soft clink against the tablecloth. What went wrong? My voice was quieter than I intended, but it carried across the sudden silence. Yes, what went wrong? While your sister is closing multi-million-dollar deals, you're what? Writing computer code in a basement? I thought about the contract sitting on my desk back at the office, about the revolutionary AI system my company had developed, the one that was about to transform global finance. About the acquisition offers from tech giants that I turned down because the numbers, 9 figures each, weren't high enough. Dad, Emma said, trying to play peacemaker, Sophie's doing fine. I mean, she's independent at least. Not everyone can handle the pressure of real corporate success. That was Emma, always managing to sound supportive while twisting the knife deeper. Independent? Dad scoffed. Is that what we're calling failure now? When I was her age, I was already making waves in the legal world. Your sister was already on track to partner. But Sophie? She's 35 with nothing to show for it except some delusional dream of being the next Steve Jobs. I pulled out my phone, fingers hovering over the banking app. For years, I kept my success hidden, partly because I enjoyed my privacy, partly because I was waiting for the right moment. Watching my father pontificate about success while my sister smirked, I realized. This was that moment. You want to talk about success, Dad? I opened the app, navigating to my main account. About legacy, about what the Morrison name means. Sophie, my mother warned, don't make a scene, it's your father's birthday. Yes, it is. I stood up slowly, and I think it's time he got his gift, the truth. We don't need another one of your homemade computer programs, Emma said with a condescending smile. Though I'm sure it's very creative. I turned my phone around, displaying the screen for everyone to see. My account balance glowed clearly, $47,282,465.19. And that was just one of my accounts. The room went completely still. I heard a glass shatter somewhere to my left. My father's voice cracked. That's impossible. Is it? I pulled up another screen, my company's latest valuation report. Morrison Technologies, of you probably know it better as MT Solutions, the AI company that's been making headlines for revolutionizing financial technology, currently valued at just over $4 billion. Emma's perfectly maintained composure cracked. MT Solutions, but they're the ones who just turned down acquisition offers from Google and Microsoft. Turned them down because they were insultingly low. I smiled, enjoying a way my father's face had lost all color. Would you like to see those offers, Dad? They're quite impressive, though not as impressive as what your failure daughter has built on her own. You're lying, he stammered. This is some kind of trick. I pulled up the company's public filings. Check for yourself. Though you won't find my name easily, I value my privacy. The same privacy that let me build an empire while you were all too busy mocking my computer thing to notice. My mother had sunk into her chair, her social smile completely gone. Emma was frantically Googling on her phone, her hands shaking slightly as headlines about MT Solutions filled her screen. $4 billion, I continued calmly. That's what your disappointment daughter's company is worth. That tiny office downtown, it's just for show. Our real headquarters takes up 3 floors in the Sterling Tower. You know, that building Emma keeps bragging about wanting to get her firm into. I own it. The silence was absolute now. Every relative who had smirked at my supposed failure sat frozen, glasses halfway to their lips. But why didn't you tell us? My mother finally managed. Tell you? I laughed softly. When have you ever wanted to hear about my work? When have any of you shown even the slightest interest in understanding what I do? I turned to my father, whose birthday celebration had taken a turn he never expected. You wanted to talk about legacy, Dad. About making a Morrison name mean something. Well, in the tech world, in the real centers of power and innovation, Morrison means something. Just not because of you. The aftermath of my revelation was exactly what you'd expect from a family that had based their entire hierarchy on perceived success. The expensive wine sat forgotten, condensation beating on crystal glasses as everyone tried to process what they just learned. Emma recovered first, her legal training kicking in. MT Solutions. They're the ones who developed that AI trading system. The one that's being implemented by major banks worldwide. She looked at me with new eyes, reassessing everything she thought she knew about her little sister. Among other things, I said, taking my seat again. Our healthcare and division is quite promising too. We're revolutionizing diagnostic procedures in ways that will save millions of lives. But my father was still struggling to form complete sentences. The Sterling Tower, that's a $300 million property. Was a $300 million property, I corrected. Worth considerably more now after the renovations. Would you like to see the deed? My mother's social instincts finally kicked in. She reached for my hand across the table, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Darling, this is wonderful. Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped, made introductions. I pulled my hand away. Made introductions? Like when you told the Hamiltons not to waste their time investing in my hobby? Or when Dad warned his clients to stay away from my amateur operation? The color drained from her face as she remembered. 3 years ago, the Hamiltons had been interested in early-stage investment. My parents had convinced them I wasn't worth the risk. We were trying to protect them, my father defended weakly, and you from inevitable failure. Protect them? I laughed. Those who did invest in my inevitable failure saw their investment multiply by 800% in 18 months. The Hamiltons recently tried to buy shares at current market value. I turned them down. Uncle Robert leaned forward, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by keen interest. Sophie, about my son's tech startup. No, I cut him off firmly. I'm not interested in investment opportunities from family. Not anymore. But we're family, Emma protested. Surely that counts for something. I turned to her, remembering all the times she lorded her success over me. Does it? Like when you convinced the partners at Anderson and Mitchell not to consider my company's software proposal. Looking out for their best interests, I believe you called it. She had the grace to look embarrassed. That proposal, rejected due to her interference, had gone to their competitors instead. The same competitors who were now dominating the legal tech sector using my company's systems. I didn't know, she whispered. No, you didn't. None of you knew because none of you cared to know. I stood up again, dropping my napkin on the table. You were also convinced you knew what success looked like. A corner office, a partnership, a house in the Hamptons. You never considered that real innovation, real world-changing success, might look different. "Sit down," my father commanded, finding his authoritative voice again. "We need to discuss this as a family. Your company, these opportunities." "Opportunities?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean now that you know I'm worth billions, suddenly my computer thing is worth discussing?" "Don't be difficult, Sophie," my mother pleaded. "Your father's just trying to understand. We all are. It's a lot to take in." I looked around the table at my assembled family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all who had spent years pitying poor Sophie while praising Emma's conventional success. Now they stared at me with naked calculation in their eyes, mentally revising every interaction we'd ever had. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, picking up my purse. "I used to dream about this moment, about showing you all what I built, proving you wrong. But standing here now, I realize something. Your approval stopped mattering a long time ago." "Sophie, please." Emma stood up. "Let's talk about this. Maybe there are synergies between our firms." "Synergies?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You mean now that you know who I am, you want to explore business opportunities? What happened to my amateur operation?" My father pushed his chair back abruptly. "Enough. I won't have you ruining my birthday with this spectacle. If you've built something successful, good for you. But your attitude." "My attitude?" I cut him off, my voice sharp. "You mean like your attitude 5 minutes ago when you called me a failure in front of our entire family? Or your attitude the past 7 years when you couldn't even be bothered to visit my office?" He fell silent, and in that silence, I saw something I'd never seen before. Uncertainty. For the first time in my life, my father wasn't sure he was right. I pulled an envelope from my purse and placed it on the table. "Happy birthday, Dad. Inside you'll find something interesting. The deed to your law firm's building. MT Solutions bought it last month through a subsidiary. Consider this notice. Your rent is doubling next quarter. Market rates, you understand." The room erupted in chaos. My mother gasped. Emma started frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to verify what I just said. My father just stared at the envelope like it might bite him. "You can't do this," he finally managed. "Actually, I can. Just good business sense. Isn't that what you always taught me?" I smiled. "Don't worry, I'm not being vindictive. You're welcome to stay, at the new rate, or you can move to one of the many other buildings in the city. Though I paused for effect, you might want to check who owns those first." I turned to leave, but Emma caught my arm. "Wait. At least let me take you to lunch next week. To talk about things, sister to sister." I gently removed her hand. "I'm afraid I'm busy next week. I'm finalizing the acquisition of Anderson and Mitchell's largest client. You know, the one whose AI contract you convinced them to reject." I washed her face pale. "Don't worry, I'm sure the partners will understand. After all, it's just business." "Sophie," my mother called out as I reached the door. "What do you want from us?" I paused, considering the question. For years, what I wanted was your approval, your understanding, your support. Now, I don't want anything from you. That's the beauty of success. It shows you what really matters and what doesn't. As I walked out of the private dining room, I heard the chaos erupting behind me. My phone started buzzing immediately. First Emma, then my mother, then a stream of messages from relatives who suddenly remembered my existence. I stepped into my waiting car, nodding to James, my driver. "The office, please." "Everything okay, Ms. Morrison?" he asked, noting my expression in the rearview mirror. "Better than okay," I replied, watching the restaurant disappear behind us. Just finished giving my father his birthday gift, the truth. Back at my real office, the top floor of Sterling Tower with its sweeping city views. I sat at my desk and finally looked at the messages flooding my phone. "Mom, please call us. We need to talk about this as a family." "Emma, this is crazy. Let me explain about Anderson and Mitchell." "Dad, your behavior tonight was unacceptable. Call me immediately." "Uncle Robert, about that startup investment." I deleted them all and opened my email, where my team had sent the latest acquisition reports. MT Solutions was about to announce another technological breakthrough, one that would reshape the industry yet again. My net worth would likely double by year's end. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. My assistant Sarah entered with a concerned look. Your sister Emma is in the lobby. Says she won't leave until you see her. I glanced at the security feed on my computer. There she was, still in her designer dress from dinner, looking decidedly less polished now. Tell her my schedule is full, I said, turning back to my work. But she's welcome to make an appointment, through proper channels, of course. Sarah nodded and left. On my screen, I watched Emma receive the message, saw her face contour in frustration before she finally left. Looking out over the city skyline, I thought about success and failure, about approval and validation. For years, I'd let their narrow definition of success make me feel small. Now I realized, true success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. I opened my phone one last time and sent a single group text to my family. Thank you for teaching me that failure is in the eye of the beholder. Rest assured, your rent increase is nothing personal, just good business sense, like you always taught me. By the way, Emma, your firm's biggest client, sends their regards. They're very excited about implementing MT Solutions' new legal AI platform through your competitors. Then I turned off my phone, picked up the latest project proposal, and got back to work. After all, empires aren't built by waiting for family approval. They're built by those willing to be underestimated. And I had been underestimated for the very last time.